look fast, and then you can sign this. Okay.
All right.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have everybody with us this morning. Looks like everybody survived the storm last night. We all made it through that. And, I don't know how many others. We lost power last night about 11 o'clock. Didn't come on until about 4:30 this morning. A transformer down the road blew up. And so we watched the sparking through the window. I was like, what is that? That ain't lightning. And I opened it. Just as I opened it up, it went whoop, whoop. That was it. And so I didn't know if we were going to get it back on, but it was good to have it because it got a little warm without a fan. All right. So that's me. Everyone's like, are you crazy? No, that's me. It was a little warm. But it's good to have everybody here as we're going to continue our study in the area of Exodus, dealing with Moses. And this morning we are in the next areas, the next three, I guess we'd say, of that of the plagues that are taking place in Exodus chapter 8. So this morning we'll look at the plague of the frogs, lice, and flies. Some versions say, instead of lice, say gnats. And so it just depends on how they're translating. Even the flies, the swarm of flies is an interesting translation. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to that. But the way it sounds more like it was lice than it is gnats, which lice, just imagine the nastiness in that and how bad that would be. So let's just jump into our questions real quick. We jump to John 4. Samaritan woman heals the nobleman's son. So how did Jesus describe worship to the Samaritan lady? Be worship in spirit of truth. And remember, she talked about worshiping the temple, the Jews, and then worshiping a certain area. And what did Jesus say? The time would come to where? You worship where? None of those areas. You worship wherever, basically. Exactly right. As we see that going about, we see that even today. Okay, so Genesis 42, it says, Genesis 2, verse 7, of what did God make man's body? Dust of the earth, yes. What did God make? Why did God make woman?
Yeah, help me.
Help me for the man, yes. And if any men, I've had a husband one time joke and say, harass the man. I was like, better his wife looked at him and I said, all right, we're done, take him out. I know we see that, but exactly to help me, because it's so much better. We know it too. Of course, that's what God wanted. Next one is how. How did he create the woman? From the rib of Adam, exactly right. And so we move on to the next one.
I was going to say, I heard the other day that that rib, we still have the same number today, but that's the only one that can grow back.
Yes, exactly right. Yes. Yeah, we do have the same ones, but it grows. Some of them are a little smaller than others, different people, but it's really interesting how that happens, how the growth of what can happen in this area of the body. Same thing with the stomach. You can put different things there and it grows back. It's just bizarre. But not bizarre, it just shows how great God is. All right, jump to the next question. What did God tell Moses to do when he approached the burning bush? He said, remove your shoes, your sandals, because this is what? Holy ground. And it was only holy because God was there. Right? At least Jesus Christ, God still being God. Next one, as we see here. Who did God give Moses to talk for him? Exodus 4:14 is exactly right. His brother Aaron. And when Moses left Jethro's house, whom did he take with him?
He took Aaron.
He took his family, wife, children, it says. And of course, we know Aaron went also. And there's also an item that he took. What was the item that he took? It said the rod of the Lord. That's exactly right. You can see that. So, all right, so on to the next one. Exodus 5:14 through 19. Why did the foreman or the taskmaster of the Israelites slaves cry out to Pharaoh? Why did he? As actually was the taskmaster. That would be the one under the taskmaster. What did he cry out? What did the Israelite slaves? We're all going to be here now. The Israelites were.
Wasn't it that they had to make brick without straw?
Yes, they had no straw. They said they weren't delivering the straw anymore, and they got real upset about that, of course, because they were trying to find stubble all throughout the kingdom, and that's all they really found was little tiny stuff. Next one, Exodus 5:22-23. Since Moses' request had only made Pharaoh treat the people worse, did Moses question God for sending him to Pharaoh? He did there. He did. He asked God about it. He said, why am I doing this again? You know, if he's not going to do anything. And God had to remind him, I've already told you it's not going to be easy. You know, paraphrasing. It's going to be done over through this period. And so, very important to see that. And it wasn't that Moses, we need to understand, it's not that Moses was questioning God in a mad way or an angry way or anything. He was just trying to clarify some things again. He was frustrated, exactly. He was thinking he'd be there a couple days and then what? Be leading them all out? And that's just not going to happen. So let's go to the next one. Exodus 6:20. Name Moses and Aaron's parents. Now, we didn't read all the names up here, but we mentioned them earlier on in the chapter. Give you an idea. Dad starts with an A, and Mom starts with a J. Amram and what? Jochebed. Exactly right. I actually put it down before you see them. There we go, right there. Next question. How old were Moses and Aaron when they spoke to Pharaoh? Let's start with Moses first. 80. How old was Aaron? 83, exactly. All right, great job. All right, let's move on into our area this morning. So this morning we're going to play with the frogs and lice and flies. And you know, the way these frogs, in that picture, I mean, they're just coming in by the millions, basically. I mean, thousands and thousands of them. So from what we know because of how big Egypt was. And so it's really interesting. They probably didn't even know there were that many frogs. And so you have lice and the swarm of flies also. So, all right. So the frogs, look at this picture right here. I want everybody to get that picture and get that in your head. Because that's exactly how it was. If not even worse, you may not have been able to even walk anywhere without stepping on a frog. And imagine where all these frogs are in this picture. Bed, sheets, chairs, bathtubs, doesn't matter where you are. You know, I mean, I say tubs, they used to use the river. They were everywhere. And how do we know that? Because of what we read. Let's go ahead and begin by chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. But before we get there, let me go back to here. Let me just say, come on, go backwards, there we go. Let me say a few words about this. First of all, Moses commanded the freedom for the Israelites, but Pharaoh has continually done what? Moses wants to get them out, but what has Pharaoh continually done? Refused. He's just not going to let them. So Aaron's staff, we go back for just a moment, back to what we were talking about Wednesday, is that Aaron's staff turned into a servant to change the mind. The Pharaoh's magicians did the same thing, but what did Aaron's staff do to his servant do to the other servants? He ate them all, ate every single one of them, exactly right. And Pharaoh was still unwilling with that. And that wasn't a plague, remember, that was just a show of power, strength, as we see here. Shortly afterward, Moses met Pharaoh along the banks of the Nile to perform the first of the 10 plagues. Aaron's staff went into the water and made the water turn into what? How much of the water?
All of it.
Everywhere, even including the Israelites. We need to understand, all these plagues are going to deal with, the Israelites are going to feel them until we get to the lice. That's where it's going to change. And we see this happening. Dad, go ahead.
One of the interesting things that I told the young people Wednesday is each one of these plagues attacked the god of certain things. Like the Nile, it was the god of the Nile, Orisis, and it was the god of the afterlife, as the Nile was essential to Egyptian life and agriculture.
Yes. We talked about the Wednesday night too. We mentioned each one of these actually deals with a god. And, some of them deal with the Nile River twice. It's with the frogs also. But it's interesting. And what we were trying to show here, as we stated that, was that God, the God, the only God, has power over every God.
Supreme.
Exactly. Supreme. There's nothing that anybody... And all these 10 plagues taking this up, that was a lot of this. You remember we said that was not just to show Pharaoh, but to show the entire world, plus the Israelites, to gain their faith and strength of where they needed to be. So all of Egypt, as we said, was filled with this blood. Pharaoh should have repented and let the Israelites go. But we see the magicians perform it too. Don't know exactly how that happened, because before they even got to that, it says that everything else was already blood, unless we see something different. But they did something there to make it. They copied it. And so now we begin to chapter 8, which holds the next 3 plagues. And like you said, we're going to deal here with the frogs. And we're going to go ahead and start this chapter 8, verse 1 through 6. If someone want to read that for us, please. There'll be 2 slides.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, Thus saith the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all your territory with frogs, So the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into your house, into your bedroom, on your bed, into the houses of your servants, on your people, into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls. And the frogs shall come upon you, on your people, and all your servants. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your rod over the streams, over the rivers, over the ponds, and cause frogs to come upon the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt.
Thank you. So here we go. Aaron, holds his staff over the river, and the frogs just start coming out like crazy. I mean, they're everywhere. And what I pointed out a minute ago about the Israelites, remember, who were the servants? Who were the servants of Pharaoh?
The Hebrews.
The Hebrews. But not just them, remember, there were other countries too that they had taken in. But I just want us to understand, Israel was included in this plague, and we see this, and there's a reason for this. We're like, why would God do that? There's a reason, because he's going to show a separation in a moment, but here he's bringing this in with them, everybody, all the land of Egypt. Didn't matter where you were going to feel this, because remember, even though the servants were working, that is the Israelites, you had Egyptians in their land too, working, having them work, do different things, so they were there everywhere. So I'm going to think about this for a moment. The people can't do anything without stumbling over frogs. And they pull the blankets back, there's a bunch of frogs. They go to make bread and kneading, through it in the kneading bowl, as we see her in their ovens, there's frogs. The frogs hop on their feet while they stand and climb onto their bodies while they lay down, and it's just a constant nuisance. I mean, I don't know how many here have ever seen a bunch of frogs at one time. I've been where they've done frog fries, and, frying them up, and catching a massive amount of big frogs, and it's just, I don't know how many like frog legs. I love frog legs. I think they're great. But when you go to see them alive and they're everywhere, it's like, no, I don't want that. So, but imagine everywhere you walk, you could not go somewhere and hide from these frogs. In other words, you couldn't hide from God. There was nowhere you were hiding from. So in fact, in Psalm chapter 105, verse 30, notice this, it says, there are land abounded with frogs, even the chambers of the king. So nobody was left out of this, brethren. All the things God chose for a plague. Why this? Why frogs? Well, it comes back a minute ago about this God. Because I doubt anyone knows for sure, really, but really we believe this is what it is, that you look closely and you see these plagues as it go through them. They kind of come in pairs, is what you're seeing with them. And first God proves he's over the Nile River, turns to blood, and then he brings something out of that river, and that is the frogs that we see here. So their God, in a sense, if the Nile was their God, why is their God allowing this to happen? Why wouldn't he stop the frogs at the what? Just stop right there at the bank, right? Not let them go any further, or just kill them all in the water. There is no God to do that. It's all false and fake, and we see that. So the next two plagues will show he's over insects. Now he's going to be over insects, lice and flies. And when he shows he's over health with disease and boils, then he's going to be over the sky with hell and lightning and locusts. And then finally he's over darkness and death. And these plagues, taken together, show basically Egypt, that Egypt is powerless in every sphere against God. Completely powerless. There is nothing they can do that God truly is supreme and controls over everything. Not only that, but the plagues that follow the frogs are actually related to their absence. And this will be interesting, to the absence of the frogs, what I say, because we already said what we're coming up to, lice and flies. What do frogs eat? They eat flies. They eat insects. They eat different kinds of insects at times. We see this. And so, as we find when the frogs die, the ecosystem, of course, is upset, really mad, so that the flies and the lice can thrive without with a lot less predators, I guess you'd say, even though we don't look at frogs as a predator, but it is to an insect that we see. So Aaron brings this plague, and Pharaoh wants to prove once again that he's got power too, so he calls his magicians to perform the same thing, which I'm telling you right now, it makes no sense to me. Why would you do that? You already have enough frogs. If this works, if God allows it, there's even going to be more frogs. And guess what? God allows it. In other words, God makes this happen. As we see here, Exodus 8, verses 7 through 8. If someone going to read that for us, please.
And the magicians did so with their enchantments, and brought up frogs on the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may sacrifice to the Lord.
Oh, we're there, right? We're finally made it, right? No, not at all. You know, the show of power sort of backfires because Egypt, as we said, already had a problem with too many frogs. Now they made it worse. When Pharaoh finally has enough, he calls for Moses and Aaron and announces the change of his mind. I finally decided. I'm going to let you go. I'm tired of this. I don't want this to have my people anymore. And basically, if you'll just go and pray to your God and take away the frogs, I'll let you go out. Well, guess what Moses does? He goes to God, and he goes and talks to him, and this is what happens. So we'll go and read this for us, please.
And Moses said to Pharaoh, accept the honor of saying, when I shall intercede for you, for your servants and for your people, to destroy the frogs from you and your house, that they may remain in the river only. So he said, tomorrow. And he said, let it be according to your word, that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. And the frogs shall depart from you, from your houses, from your servants, and from your people. Then they shall remain in the river only.
Thank you. Notice what happens here. Moses asks Pharaoh when he basically wants him to go to God and pray. And guess what Pharaoh say? Tomorrow. Now that's a little confusing, isn't it? You're thinking, if this thing is this bad, when do you want him gone? Now, immediately. When we look at this, the only thought to this is that Pharaoh thought maybe over the night, because now the frogs will do what? They'll slowly disappear, go away, and I'll show it wasn't their God that did this. Well, that's not the case. That didn't happen at all. So Moses, of course, goes to God. He's going to do this, and we find here in verses 12 to 15 as they, went out from Pharaoh. And let's go ahead and read what it says here.
Then Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried out to the Lord concerning the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. So the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, and out of the fields. They gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and did not heed them as the Lord had said.
Thank you. Here we go. Pharaoh breathes a sigh of relief when the frogs are gone, and doesn't even take a moment. Just immediately hardens his heart even a little more and says, nope, I changed my mind. I'm not going to allow this. Don't miss the number of times it says that he hardens his heart, meaning that as the Lord has said. Some people downplay God involved in this. They'll think like, well, God didn't actually do this. No, God did this. God did this to his heart. But how? He did it with his power, with his word. And it hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Remember, God's not doing this to be evil, to be mean, to be just a terrible person. He's doing it to prove a point. And he's doing it to drive something home. That, look, notice who I'm over. I'm over everything. If you want to be a part of this, come to God. Come to me. And that's just not going to happen. And it's nothing new. We even see another one. Remember with Nebuchadnezzar. Think back to Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was struck with insanity while in the middle of bragging. He was bragging about his own power. And it was already told, if you do this, this is going to happen. And he ran to the field and he ended up eating grass like an oxen. In fact, someone go and read what it says to us to remind us of this. That this area of the Exodus is the only time this has happened. Daniel chapter 4, verse 33, please.
That very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws.
Thank you. Here's another individual. Same thing. Was given a warning of what needed to be done, and still decided not to follow God. This is what took place. There's another one also. Remember, if you go back to King Herod, you heard the people calling him a god, and his heart swelled up with pride. He's like, yeah, that's right, I am a god. And so the angel of the Lord, it said, did something to him. What does it say he did?
Struck him.
Go ahead and read. Someone go and read that for us.
Then immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give glory to God, and he was eaten by worms and died.
Thank you. So I just want to point out that God has done this before. God has done this with his word, with his power and strength. God can do whatever he wants to Pharaoh, and he's not trying to change his mind through the plagues. Think about this as we see it. He's not trying to change his mind through the plagues because he knows he's not going to change his mind. He's just going to have to go through all this course of what's happening. It's once again to show his power to everybody, which brings us now to these nasty creatures, and that is the lice. Exodus 8:16 through 19, and we'll go ahead, if someone will read this for us, please, 16 through, I think I have 18 there, yep, 16 through 18.
So the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land, so that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And they did so. For Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth, and it became lice on man and beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. Now the magicians so worked with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. So there were lice on man and beast.
Thank you. So here's the change. We see something changing here. And I want you to think about this for a moment. It said that it was, notice what it said there in back to verse 16. It says, and strike the dust of the land. Think about this. He wanted it to be as much as the dust. Has anybody here ever been to Egypt? Anybody ever seen pictures of Egypt? What does it seem like it's got a lot of? A lot of dust, right? A lot of sand. I mean, if anybody, I was looking at West Texas Panhandle, if you've ever been in a dust storm or been in Oklahoma, it's just terrible. I mean, I've been to where actually the dirt was coming, you couldn't even see this huge wall of cloud. And next thing you know, it's raining, you look at your white shirt and you have dirt pellets everywhere on your shirt. That's what it did. Now you imagine, those are big chunks put together by water. You think about the fineness of dust. If you ever wipe dust off in your house, you know what it is. Lice was like that. And think about when you go to wipe dust off in your house, you find it just about where? Everywhere, it seems like. I mean, everywhere. And so that's what he's getting at. The lice were going to be everywhere. You weren't going to get away with this. But this third plague is very important to see as the lice of the dust. The most notable point is the magicians try to duplicate it, and it can't be done. God's done with that. It just can't be done anymore. This is the reason the other wonders could have been supernatural, not just tricks, that they were definitely supernatural. And if they could if they could turn a staff into serpents or water into blood and bring frogs out of the water, then surely they could do this also. And it's not possible. And this is why it explains to us very close, very easily that who was involved with all this. God. It was all about God. And when we see this happening, the importance behind it. Some have said, well, they were magic. They were able to do this. No, that's not what it is. God allowed things. Has God ever used other people and evil to get his ways done, to get his will done? Without a doubt, he's done that. And so the only thing we read about them, basically these magicians, after this, they're done pretty much. This is it. The only thing we read after them is that they stand in front of Moses because they're covered in boils. When we get to chapter 9 and verse 11, when we get to verse 11, you'll see that. But now in chapter 8, verse 19, let's go a little further. Let's someone go ahead and read verse 19 for us. Here's what you need to read. This is what we need to see here.
Then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had said.
Thank you. This is an interesting point. So when they realize the power is beyond their ability, they confess. This is the finger of God, as we just read there. They don't call him Yahweh, though. So in other words, they're not referring it to only, the God. Moses' God that we would understand. But they admit to Elohim, meaning a generic word for any God. But what they are saying here, they're talking to Pharaoh saying, the God that is with Moses, that's basically what they're getting at. This is from him. In other words, we cannot defeat this. We cannot, do what he's doing. It's just remarkable. And you think Pharaoh would say, okay, let's talk about this for a moment and think about this. No, what happened very quickly? His heart hardened again. Just kept growing hard as we see here. So, it must be a slap in the face of Pharaoh who considers himself deity and thinks so little to Hebrews. Remember, he thinks he's way above them all. And that's very important to understand. Even though all of these things were happening, God's going to do anything. Remember, Pharaoh too considers himself a god, a deity. If you're a god, you should be able to do what? Especially if you're the God over all your people, you should be able to do what with your land?
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want. You should be able to control it, but you can't. So, however, the admission has the opposite effect here of what we might expect. Rather than coming to his senses and letting the people go, he's just hardened even more. And he refuses again. I wondered about this at this point. The magicians before this, I always think about this, about doing, turning the water into blood, having the frogs come out, and you're looking at this and you're thinking like, what did they think when they, or they're, turning to their servant and saying, they must have thought like, how did I do that? They had to have, because they knew everything else they were doing was just a what? It was a trick, and there's no way you're going to trick these things. So it's like, how is this possible? And so they get to this point where they can't do this, and that's when the truth comes out. And and you think they've got to be thinking, what is wrong with Pharaoh? Come on, let's get this taken care of, let them go, and then let's get this done. But Pharaoh, when he sees this, all he keeps seeing is a loss of revenue, a loss of money, a loss of what would take care of them. Even though, like we said, there were other countries there without a doubt, but none of them numbered by the amount of the Israelites. He would lose a lot at this moment. So we get to our next point. We get to the flies. So now we come into the, come on thing, work for me. All right, here we go. There we go. So now we get into the swarm of flies. How many here, let me say, I don't even have to ask how many. We've all been outside, eating or something, a picnic, whatever, man. And what is the pesky things that won't leave you alone? Flies. I mean, they're here. We just one fly. Yeah. I mean, it's fly after fly after fly after fly. How many ever hung up those bags that you hang up, you fill them up with water? Anybody ever use those? And they're supposed to catch flies, and they have a terrible scent into them once you do that. But, you come back a week later, and what is that bag? It's full of flies. And so we see this. So imagine having that everywhere you are, every moment of the day. Every moment, every second, every minute, we see that. So in this area, we see verses 20 through 32, and we're going to jump into verses 20 through 21 and see what we can find here. So if someone, see this thing, come on, let's work. There we go. All right, someone go and read 20 through 21 for us, please.
And the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh as he comes out to the water. Then say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me, or else, if you will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants, on your people and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground of which they stand.
Oh. Come on. Okay, that's it. All right. Is that 21? Come on. Okay, there we go. That was there. All right. So as we see here, here's the difference in this one, a couple things. Remember with the lice, which is interesting, they couldn't perform it. But did the lice say it was only on Pharaoh's people? No. I mean, guess who's dealing with that too? I mean, everybody. So here we come though to this plague. The last one we'll talk about today. A swarm of flies, sounds harmless. But the Hebrew word, and when you look at this in the Hebrew, it doesn't mean flies. It just means swarms. That's what it actually, swarms of insects. When you look at the meaning behind it, there's a lot of debate on what it actually was, but pretty much everyone agrees basically a meaning of the word of a mixture of insects, and the word mixture is there. And so when we see this, we look at this word and we think, okay, what were they doing? What were flies doing? Because flies usually they're just they're just pestering you by, unless it's a horse fly or certain kind of flies that can bite, but look what it says it was doing to them. Very important to understand when we go back to Psalm 78 or forward, 78 verse 45. Someone read that for us, please.
He set swarms of flies among them, which devoured them.
Which devoured them. So we see the word devoured, when we look at this in the Hebrew also, there in the Psalms, it has to do with biting. And so when we think about this, they devoured the Egyptians. Maybe it was, as we said, maybe it was biting flies, or maybe it was a mixture of flies, hornets, mosquitoes, a bunch of other insects. A lot of insects, when they come in, they don't just come in one or two, do they? I mean, they come in swarms of them. They come in a lot of them. We see this. And, so here what we find out once again, just like the other insects, there's no longer, doesn't seem like there's any what to take care of and eat them. Frogs, exactly right. The frogs are gone again. The point is that, as we see with this plague in the houses, on the ground and on the bodies, they were just basically everywhere with the frogs, and now you have it with the flies. So it brings us verses 22 and 23. And this, like I said, this is where it gets interesting and what we find deals with the Israelites. If someone will go and read this for us, please.
And in that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, in order that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. I will make a difference between my people and your people, tomorrow, this sign shall be.
Oh, here we go. Now, you know, it's one thing we would say with God, you know, doing this with everybody, and it's just, you know, coming to the land of Egypt. Now, he's actually putting a wall up. There's a separation. And, you know, how many here have tried to run away from flies? I mean, trying to get away from them. You know what I mean? I say run, but move. You say, I'm tired of this fly at this table. You go over to a different table, what do you have over there? That same fly follows you. I'm telling you, it does. I mean, it just seems like it. And we see this. So, you know, flies, do flies understand boundaries?
Nope.
No, they don't understand boundaries, or we say insects at all. They don't get boundaries at all. I mean, you've got a wall around your house and doors and windows. And where do you find insects from time to time?
In the house.
In the house. So we see this. So it's not like they flew to Goshen and they went, oh, hit something and go, oh, we can't get in there. Let's go back this way. God held them back, just like he holds many things back. The oceans, the seas, the Bible talks about, and just so many things. So God made this great distinction here between Moses and the magicians. With the lice, showed the distinction at that point that they weren't as powerful as they thought they may be. And here he makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. He says, Israel is my people. They're not going to deal with this anymore. Only you are. And brethren, this is something he says several times throughout Exodus. And it's something that shouldn't be missed, that God is going to show the complete difference of the two. And the plagues, remember, they're a judgment against one people and a deliverance for another people. And that's what we find here in these verses, which brings us to verses 24 through 32. I'm going to finish early today. 24 through 32. That's good. I'll actually go get my book and we can actually go over some of the questions there that I never do because I never have time to do that at the end. Someone go ahead and read for us. I say that, now watch, I won't make it. 24 through 32. Someone go ahead and read this for us, please.
And the Lord did so. Thick swarms of flies came into the house of Pharaoh, into his servant houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted because of the swarm of flies. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, go, sacrifice to your God in the land. And Moses said, it is not right to do so, for we would be sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. If we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, then they will not stone us. We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he will command us. So Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far away. Intercede for me. Then Moses said, indeed, I am going out from you, and I will entreat thee, Lord, the swarm of flies may depart tomorrow from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. But let Pharaoh not deal deceitfully on anyone in not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And he, Lord, did according to the word of Moses. He removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained. But Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also. Neither would he let the people go.
Thank you. So as we go back to this, we do see, notice how it says Pharaoh, his people, and his servants. And that's why we explain also, remember, it wasn't the Israelites, we know that, but it was the other servants, these other countries that they had brought in over the years here. So Pharaoh has his fill of flies. I mean, he's done with them. I mean, who wouldn't be? I'll just say this. I'll tell a little story real quick, just to give you an idea of flies again. You know, I don't know if you've been there, but flies are really, really, really bad. But when we lived in the Panhandle in Texas, there was a feeding yard, and it had there were more cows in our country, in our county than there were people. I'll just say that. The feeding yard there had at any time 275,000 cattle. 275,000 cattle at the south end of the town. I know when we went up there the first time, we passed that, and I told Melissa, this place is going to stink. It's going to be really bad. It's going to be tough to deal with this. And we got up there to the church building, got up to the house. We were busy. No smell. It's like, this is great. This is just wonderful. Moved up there. Second day we were there. What is that smell? You know, I mean, it was crazy. And that smell attracts what? Flies. And I'll never forget the time everybody told us, they said, don't ever leave your doors open. Don't leave them open during the summertime or, or really any time. And wintertime, of course, you're not so cold. But we went away on vacation somewhere, I forgot where we went, and we left one of the doors open. We went away for a day, maybe Amarillo or something. We left one of the doors open, came home, and our house and our garage was full of thousands of flies. Thousands of flies. Don't you love that? We just pulled everything out of the fridge and let them have a feast, right? I mean, we went around killing flies all day. I mean, it was terrible. And, when I think about that, every time I read this, I think about that, and I thought, that was the worst fly experience we ever had in my life, and it was nothing compared to what Pharaoh and them did. You couldn't get away from them. We could go outside and get away for a little bit, but you just couldn't do it anywhere here. So here these flies are here. Pharaoh has his fill of flies, so he seeks compromise and commands Moses to offer sacrifice within Egypt. I know anybody get tired of flies real quick. Of course, Moses refuses. Notice what he does. Moses refuses because he says you can go out and sacrifice in the land. In other words, in the land of Egypt. What has Moses said every time they need to go where? For how many days' journey to get away from there? 3 days' journey. And we see this when we go, why is this so bad? He said, because the people would stone them. Well, why would they stone them? Because of what they're sacrificing. The cows or different things, or goats, whatever it may be, they're sacrificing things that the Egyptians actually look at as what? Gods. Exactly right. And they knew that if they did this, they were going to get so upset and get so mad that they would start killing them. And he's like, we can't do this. And you think Pharaoh, Pharaoh should have known that, and maybe Pharaoh thought, well, I'll just kill some of them. This is going to be okay. He had no problem with it. But Moses agrees, says, okay, I'll tell you what. We're not doing that, but I'll go and pray to God. And he warns about being deceptive, but Pharaoh's heart hardens as soon as the flies are gone, changes his mind again. Changes his mind. And this brings us, as we see the end of chapter 8, through these plagues. And I just ask you, how many of these things do you think you can handle? To continue to tell somebody no? I mean, really, the only people he's talking to is Pharaoh. He's not talking to all the people. I mean, all the people out there, do you think maybe they may be thinking, like, why are we not getting rid of these people? Because do you think the word got out? Do you think the word got out that Moses and Aaron were doing this? Their God was doing it, and they were making these things happen? Without a doubt. I mean, think about the Israelites, just themselves, when they were no longer being delivered straw, and they were having to go out and stumble. And when they came out of Pharaoh after telling them, when they saw Moses and Aaron there, did the Israelites tell Moses and Aaron, we want you gone, stop this, get out of here? They did. Think the Egyptians would be any different? Not at all, brethren, we see that. So I just want us to think about this, what's going on here. And I just want you to realize something about the power of the Word of God. God's Word is going to do one of two things. It's either going to cause you to move closer to God, or cause you to do what? To move farther away from God. And just because it depends on where our heart is, where we're at. And Pharaoh's heart was with himself. That's what we need to catch here. Our hearts as Christians need to always be with God. We don't want these things to happen to us. None of these Israelites wanted this. Moses didn't want this. And I believe now, if you've noticed, every time we see his heart hardening, you think Moses would come back to God again and argue, and get upset again. Have we seen that? We haven't seen that. Moses sees what's going on. Moses is finally aware of it, and what it is, he's trusting God completely. And God is taking care of these things. And the Israelites in the same way of what we find here. So we're going to close there. Actually got a minute and a half, so that's not bad. They give you time to visit. Any comments or questions before we close? Go ahead, Jennifer.
I just think it's kind of interesting that when God put the barrier between Goshen and Egypt, that if you were an Israelite living on this side and an Egyptian living on this side, flies and everything, and when you're looking at that, how awesome that must have been. But also, it seems that God is telling the Egyptians and the Israelites, I'm bigger than your gods, because the Israelites were worshiping the Egyptian gods at the time. So telling them, hey, I'm bigger than they are, and I'm going to deliver you. So it's just another reason for them to trust him more.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it like you said, I think the remark part is like you said, if you're there on that side, looking over and seeing the swarms of flies or insects, whatever they were, just seeing them constant. And like I said, it's like a barrier right there. I mean, it's So imagine if you're an Israelite, you just go, I'm just going to try it. Womp over this, no way, get back over here. I mean, you think about that, but I doubt an Israelite did that. I mean, they may have. Humans are weird. You know, we all do. We all are curious like cats at times, and so that might happen, but it is a remarkable moment. Yeah, go ahead.
We read these things and say, that's things that happened then, but if we, like Jennifer was doing, trying to apply it to us today, if we can recognize that what goes on in the world, that we can be away from that, God will protect us.
Mm-hmm.
He will give us that barrier if we allow it. But like you say, do we want to get close to the edge and just put our foot in the water and see how cold it is or what happens? But we don't. We don't want to. God will care for us, and He says that throughout. And sometimes we falter.
Yep, that's exactly right.
You know, we can see it, and when we look at those things and recognize how we can live our lives, not being pestered by the things of the world, but having this protective hedge around us if we remain in Christ.
That's exactly it. You know, that's exactly right. You know, we talked about before, you know, some people straddling the fence. You know, if you straddle the fence there in Egypt, that barrier, you're getting bit on one side. The other side's free, but you're getting bit. That's what sin does, right? Same thing. I mean, it bites us. It hurts us. And we see that. So these stories are remarkable. There's so much you can look at when you look at these. But we just appreciate God giving them to us. All right, we'll go ahead and close there. Thanks for your time.
He's here.